What have been the key factors to your success?
We all have the ability to control certain things. And I think when you have a belief in that, Phil, when you wake up in the morning, you can control X, Y, and Z no matter what, right? So some of it is your mentality. You're choosing to have a good day mentally. Like you're waking up and you're saying, I'm going to make this a great day, right? So it's kind of mindset day one. It's your drive, right? It's being organized. All those things, your follow through, your follow up, you can control that. Sales, business, teacher, doesn't entrepreneur, doesn't matter. You can control that. And thankfully I was taught and embodied that very early on in my career. And I embody that today as entrepreneur. And the people we hire and bring onto our team, I try to ensure that they embody that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Ross McArthur. Ross, how are you doing today, man?
Very good. Nice to finally meet you.
For everyone's just knowledge, a little bit more about Ross. He is a real estate investor. He has many multifamily assets, but he spent a lot of time in the corporate world, 15 years for different software companies. He leveraged a lot of what he learned there, whether that be software, managing employees, sales, to help him in real estate. He started buying real estate in 2020. So just over 4 years ago. And then he left his corporate career in 2023, I think, to focus on real estate full time. So how did you get started in real estate, or tell me your backstory a little bit?
Yeah, we were joking about this because this could be really long or very short. So my goal is to keep it on the short side. But I was born and raised in Michigan. Kind of, this will make a little more sense as we dive into different topics. But I was born and raised in Michigan, and when I graduated, I essentially said, like, I'm a free agent. I will move anywhere in the country, like a lot of people. And this is back in 2007, 8, 9, in that time frame. And I ended up getting a job with Michelin North America. Moved out west. After that stop, I went on to work for a startup company. Grew that company over 3 more years, and that kind of got me an entrepreneurship feel. And then I left that company and then spent about 10 years working my way up the corporate ladder at a large private software company, actually out of Dayton, Ohio, funny enough, because Phil, that's his backyard essentially. And then on the side of this entire time, pretty much my entire corporate career, really since I was about 16 years old, I've been intrigued by real estate. But Phil and I were joking early on, I didn't really have anybody in my life that did real estate. So a lot of people like have business owners and things like that around them. My mom was actually a stay-at-home mom. She could have went and I honestly think killed it in corporate America. She just chose to stay home and help raise us. And she taught us a ton of blocking and tackling financial stuff, like, credit card debt, interest, mortgage, living within your means, just basic, like, good financial education. But that was it. It kind of stopped there. There was no real estate. There was no, diversification discussions or even, going up and beyond that, that you could be an entrepreneur. And so I had that itch. But that itch really stayed there for about 10 years. And then I don't know if anybody listening has a corporate, sales job, but there's usually a lot of travel involved. And so I had a ton of travel. And just like you mentioned in the intro, podcasts are a great educational source, I guess, for lack of a better word, out there. And so I would just start listening about real estate podcasts, like a lot of us, Bigger Pockets, podcasts like yourself, so on and so forth. And finally, in 2020, I decided I was going to take control of my retirement, because there's in 2008 and 9, we all know kind of what happened. Most of my family was involved in the auto business. My wife's dad worked for GM for 35 years. I remember vividly him coming in one day and saying, "Oh my gosh, 66% of my savings just went poof, gone,"
Yep.
because of the crashes. And that moment was so impactful. So what really drove me to even jumping into real estate is I wanted to control my financial path when it comes specifically to retirement. I wanted to be able to retire when I wanted to retire. And no matter what tweet went out there, no matter what was going on in the market, I had total control. So that really started in 2020. I'm going to kind of pause there real quick, just in case you had
Yeah,
any
for sure.
feedback.
I wanna, there's like three or four different things. First, you said it, so I want to ask a question on this, but just listening to podcasts for any business, any career, any area of life, there is a good podcast out there for you. And keep searching for different ones until you find a good one. But there's so many good podcasts on all areas of life. So I love that point. But I want to ask you a couple of questions on. First, you worked both in a small company that you helped grow, so you really got the sense of entrepreneurship there, and you worked in the corporate world. We have a lot of listeners that, maybe they're in the corporate world or in a small business and they love what they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're uncertain if they should go into real estate or small business or just change companies. So you've done three things: real estate, entrepreneurship, company, and corporate world. How would you compare those three?
Oh man, that is we could have a podcast on that if I'm being honest with you. And I'll add technically a fourth in there. I also work for a public, top 100 company,
Yep.
Fortune 500 company, I should say. And I also work for one of the largest private companies, software companies. So very different public versus private. But I would say they're all different and all have positives. I want to hit on one point because it's hard to delineate all of them in a concise way. But one of the points you mentioned was, they like what they do. Every step of my career, I actually liked what I did. I never got into real estate, and I hate LinkedIn and social media sometimes for this one thing where it's get rich quick, financial freedom, quit your job tomorrow. Like none of that was me. Zero of that was me. My entire goal, whether it was working for Michelin, working for the startup company, or working for a large private company, was just solely to create a good retirement plan. That was it. I enjoyed what I did. But fortunately, and we'll get into this later in different parts, but I just grew it to a point where I couldn't do both. And so I had to make a decision. I think, you asked the differences. I think one of the main differences, a startup company versus either big public or private company, is speed. So speed is incredible. And I had a former friend and actual boss that I worked with at the large private company who said, this job's going to kill you because it moves so slow. Because I used to look over my shoulder and be like, hey, you cool with that? Yeah, I'm cool with that. Okay. And we would go do it. That's how quick the speed was.
Yep.
And other times we would have suggestions and literally documentation around a decision that would last 3 years and never got done. And so speed is definitely one of them. The other thing is just kind of ownership, if I'm being honest. And some of that is in big companies, small companies, it doesn't matter. But in entrepreneurship or a startup company, there's just a lot of ownership. You touch a lot of things. Every decision you make is so impactful. And so that really, I said earlier, like I didn't have a lot of entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs around me. That was it. That was my first bath of learning entrepreneurship and seeing the company grow.
I,
Um,
I like that. And one thing I was going to say, just like the main message for me from that comparison isn't a direct comparison, because that's going to be different for everyone and what they like and don't like. And I think that's the point is, over time, you're not going to go into any job, any career, any business and immediately know this is for me or not on day one. You might get some indications, but the key is, I think, paying attention to the culture, the environment you're in, your coworkers, and build your self-awareness of who you are and what you like to do, and see if the place you're at, whether that's your own or a different business or a large business, are you a good fit? Do you feel good about what you're doing? I think, like, money speaks to what people should do. And I'm going to come back with my next question on the money and the financial control that you talked about. And it's definitely it can be a factor and it should be a factor. However, there's a lot of different ways to make money. And if you're miserable doing it, go do something different. If you're working for a company that you absolutely love and you're passionate about doing it, then keep doing it, and you don't need to go do something different. So it's really getting to know yourself and building self-awareness around what you like in who you work for, whether that's someone else or yourself, and then finding that and going and doing that.
You bring up a good point that I'll kind of tag on to, but all those companies you can compare good pros and cons to all of them and all the situations. But the thing that you mentioned was the people, and I think that is what makes no matter what you do fun. Entrepreneurship, business owner, corporate America doesn't matter, and who you work for. If you like that, that was one of the reasons why I held on so much in my last career, probably longer than I could have or should have even maybe, is because to be honest with you, I love the people I worked with. I didn't love what I was doing. I wasn't passionate. We talked about this before. I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, but I loved the people, the camaraderie. They were friends of mine. And so it made the job not a heavy lift. And I think in anything in life, work for yourself, work for other people, you have to either be really passionate about what you do and or love the people you're doing with. And in the perfect world is both, right?
Yep.
That's where unicorns come out and life is really good, right?
And I think there's a perception that a sales role is a relationship business. Is my opinion. Every business is a people business. Every people is a relationship business, no matter what role you play. If you're in IT, if you're in finance, if you're in sales or marketing, it's about the people and the relationships you build. I agree 100%. The other thing you talked about is really what shifted your mindset in 08, 09 was everything that was going on with the financial crisis, being around or connected to the auto industry and seeing the impact that it had. And I think what's important people to understand is there's always risk with a job and what you're doing. It's I think important to understand those risks. But a lot of people might say, and there were some past books we've probably read, not doing anything else or not having additional streams of income is also, or not having saving. Those things are risky, even though I think so many people just, I have a job, I get a paycheck, so I'm protected forever. So tell me more about your thought process around that and kind of how that made you shift directions a little bit.
Yeah, and I am incredibly passionate about financial literacy as an umbrella, just that term, and we'll dive into that later. But one of the things is I had to kind of teach my own self things and get literate myself. And so people say that mindset of, I'm just going to work, I'm going to put in money into the 401k, and I hope when I'm ready to retire, there's enough money in there. Plus maybe if I'm lucky, some social security, if I'm lucky, quote unquote, right? So I think for me, whenever I hear somebody who says, real estate as an example is incredibly risky, what scares the crap out of me? Going to buy a stock. It terrifies me. Even if it was $3,000, it terrifies me. But for whatever reason, go and buy a house that I'm going to flip cash, sight unseen for 50, 60, 70 grand, or going to buy a 70 unit apartment complex, I do not lose an ounce of sleep over it. And it's so funny because Ross, 15 years ago would have been terrified, right? But the more you learn, the more you really realize that risk is in the eye of the beholder. And that's what's really becomes powerful is once you figure that out, like, the stock market, I have zero control over it. I have not 1 ounce of control whether that stock goes up or down. But I buy a hard asset, I have I'm not going to say 100%, but I have a significant amount more control whether that is successful or not. So for me, when you talked about like, diversification and wealth and controlling our own destiny and all those things, I just chose to put it in that bucket because of all those reasons. I can control my outcome a lot more than other things.
Yep.
I hope that makes sense.
It does, because before you said risks are in the eye of the beholder, basically, I wrote down that risk is based on what you know and the actions that you have taken up to this point. Because my first single family house investment, I looked at it as extremely risky, right? And like all the things that could go wrong. And now I know that well enough where I would just, if I thought there was a single family house that I liked and it just, it's protected, there's just not a lot of risk exposure to it, I would just go do it very, very, very quickly. So I think understanding risk is so important. And I would also say that you and I's perception of, especially investing in an individual stock in the stock market, for me, would be very risky, partially because I haven't spent the time on it. I don't understand it well. That's not where my portfolio is. So I just haven't studied it. I haven't acted upon it. Maybe some people have, and they've studied it and they feel like they can control it and understand it. So then it feels less risky for them. So I think your comment, risk is in the eye of the beholder, is so important. I also think that real estate, if done correctly, is just a generally lower risk. You have a hard asset there that you can, especially real estate, that you can control, or you control yourself. You can eliminate a lot of risk, and you can really control it.
Well, let me ask you, I'm going to turn it, host to guest. We're going to flip spots real
I get
quick.
the total choice on whether I want to answer this or not, just so you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, 100%. But I'm sure there's people in your inner circle, corporate America, your former life, now, your family even, who understand that you do real estate, have a general curiosity about it, right? They're intrigued by it. But no matter how you explain to it, the pros, the cons, you're going to say the sky's blue and they're going to say it's green. Like, no matter what, they're going to say, yeah, but what happens if the toilet overflows? Or what happens if somebody doesn't pay rent? And no matter what, that person, they are not going to change their mindset.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'll say is risk is the eye of the beholder. But then there's some people that are also just very close-minded, period. Like, it does not matter. They are going to do A, B, and C for the next 40 years of their life, and that's okay. That's their prerogative. But then there's other people that actually truly want to learn. But there's that person where I'm Phil, you can name them right now if you want. You can call them out. But you're going to say that sky's blue, and no matter what you tell them, they're going to say, no, man, that's green. That sky's green.
Yeah, 100%. And I can think of people. I'm not going to say their names, but for sure there are people that don't understand, and maybe they're not curious, or even if they are curious, perceive what we're doing. If you're leveraging debt, it's really they perceive it as being very, very risky. And the key is, so like we'll just talk about debt. To me, it's not just the debt. Is it fixed debt? What's your debt service coverage ratio? How much margin do you have on that debt? Right? Is it an asset? Like, is your debt on your house and it's a liability, or is it paying you every month? So there's all kinds of things that we could talk about with someone to explain the risk. But no matter what, there are people that think, oh man, what real estate is just risky. I agree 100%. Good stuff. Well, so financial literacy. I mean, let's talk about that a little bit more. So you talked about your mindset around that early, but how would you, like, if you were to teach someone that was 20, 25, 30, whatever it would be, financial literacy, like what would your major messages be for a young adult on financial literacy?
Well, I think there's two sides. Like, there's financial literacy, and then there's in education, and then there's kind of mindset. And they go hand in hand. So I know you said like 20, 30-year-old. If you don't mind, I'd almost like to shift a little younger than that, because we both have young kids. Over your right shoulder is a picture of your kids. I have an 8 and a 5-year-old. And so we're kind of, and this isn't, I want this because we have a lot of friends that are teachers, and that is a key part to our US in how our kids are brought up. So I don't want to take a knock at our education system, but I do want to mention that it is so clear as we're going through education. My daughter's in 3rd grade. We teach so many good things, but then on the other hand, we teach a lot of things that, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know how to do some of her homework, and she'll never use it again. We're only in 3rd grade. I can't imagine 8th, 9th, 10th grade, college, things like that. So, our goal as parents, me and my wife, Katie, and I'm sure you and your wife, Phil, is to blend what they're getting at school also with real world education. And what, some of that's not crazy. It's saving, it's understanding what things cost. So, when we go to the store with my daughter and she might want, X toy, and there's another toy that she wants, and she likes them semi equally. One is $40 and one is $20. Honey, you can spend on this one twice as much, but if you like this one, kind of similarly, like, it's not like a home run, like you absolutely have to have one or the other, buy the $20 one, or grocery store cheese as an example. Like, there's the private, Publix brand or whatever brand, the private brand that you want to use it, or there might be the expensive brand that's twice as much. If you don't have a brand preference, why are you buying the one that costs twice as much? Like, things like that. I'm going to pause because it looks like maybe you want to mention something.
I mean, so first of all, we have 5 children. So we're talking about financial literacy with our kids for sure. Now, do we have a structured game plan? I can't say that we do, but okay, first, like our daughter might go babysit. Okay, save that money. Do you want to put that money in an online account? It can make 4% right now. Is that interesting to you? Well, this is what it could do over time. Like, there's all kinds of opportunities. And I think the key takeaway there is like, I don't know how you said it, but supplementing the formal education with, like, parents need to take responsibility for their kids' education around not just finance. I mean, just general things. And, hey, go up there and order yourself. Look the person in the eye. There's all kinds of things that I think kids should be doing on their own. So what other areas, or what other things are you guys all doing with your kids maybe to help them grow in their financial literacy?
So one thing, it's so classic, the lemonade stand thing. So I'm gonna try to keep this story brief, but I think it's kind of a cool and neat story. It just happened last week. So we had our community garage sale, and the kids want to save for phones, which drives me nuts. By the way, she's 8. Like, you can have a phone when you're maybe 6th or 7th grade. But okay, sure, we'll save for a phone. Why not? Let's have goals. And they wanted to do a lemonade stand, and so they wanted to do a practice run one night, and it was like on a Wednesday, middle of the week type thing. I'm like, baby, there is no supply and demand out here. Like, you're gonna go out here and sit here and nobody's around, right? Why don't you wait till the garage sale comes up? Well, I want to practice. I want to get used to doing this. So I naysayed that thing left and right. By the way, I was like, this is a dumb idea. There's nobody gonna be around. Those kids made $35 on a Wednesday in the front yard, and so what's wrong in that? I mean, they, clearly me. But so that was a good practice one. But what you learned was they jumped on bikes with signs and drummed up their own traffic
Yep, I
because there
love
was
it.
nobody around. So, right. So what she learned in that first small run is traffic matters. You have to go out and find people. It just sometimes it doesn't organically drive by the front of you. Then comes the garage sale, and this is game time, right, for her. And so we went out and we shopped, right? We went to Costco, and I explained to her. She was like, "Well, why don't we go buy pre-made lemonade?" I was like, "Babe, that's like $6 a jug. Like, you can go buy this Country Time stuff. It's like $6. It'll make you like 10 jugs." And so we wrote out, okay, that cost you $6. How much are cups? How much are lemons to add to the drink? Cookies they were going to sell too, and we figured out the cost. Then we figured out what they were going to sell it for, right? And then we created margin, or net income. And
And
then, oh,
and
go
what
ahead.
what I like about that is, you started this with financial literacy, but you taught sales, marketing, supply chain, pricing, strategy, cost. Just with this simple example, there's so many different categories of business and life again that you can teach a kid by doing just this simple example, supply, demand, all that stuff.
Well, and then what's funny is she did it with another girl. So there's a partnership now, right? And actually, technically 3 girls, but one could only be there for a part of the time, right? So she had karate or something in the morning. So they had to talk amongst themselves after how to split those proceeds because one
Yeah.
was only there for half. So does she get the full amount? And so it's funny, and we just let it play out, right?
Yeah.
And that's critical thinking, that's problem solving. Those are the things that these kids are missing. And so full circle now. And by the way, they made like $77, right? So they did good, and it was a great time, and their profit was like $50. So it was a good day for all, and they worked their butts off on
Yeah.
it. So
That's
right.
also work
So
ethic too.
some things
Yeah.
can just, they're timeless, right? That lemonade stands are, 70 years old, 100 years old type of situation. So, fast forward now, that same kid, let's talk about somebody who's never done that. And then that's compounded over the years. And they never learned how to critically think. They never learned how to problem solve. They never learned how to give change or how math, financial math works. What something costs, what you sold it for, what your net profit is, all those things. And then they go to college, right? And here's a good example of what I would tell somebody. You ask for advice, as a young budding, maybe somebody graduating from high school. What do you want to do? How much does that make? What's the yearly salary for that? How much is your education going to cost? Oh, you want to stay in school and go get your master's because you're too scared to get a job? Okay, well, what's that cost?
Right.
You
There's
know,
there's so many lessons. So the two things I wrote, first of all, you talked about one specific example in the last few weeks, but if you do that, if the kids just do that every 3 months or every 6 months, once a year, even that cumulative impact of that before they go away is one thing. But the other thing you kind of said, but you didn't say, I just heard this recently. They can experience this for the first time without you there out of the house, but they can also experience these things with you there, mentoring and guiding them on the way. And as a parent, who do you want guiding them? Someone else, or do you want them to make mistakes on their own, but then you can kind of course correct or ask them questions to do the critical thinking and be a guide there. So I like you said that without saying it specifically, but I think that's just another element of it is you kind of let them go, but you're monitoring it and you're helping them gain the perspective of what happened as these things happen.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna end with this because I'm sure there's a lot of topics we want to pivot around to, but you asked about things we're doing. So one of the things is you're an entrepreneur and I'm an entrepreneur, and we haven't got into kind of the full picture of what we do yet, but we have essentially 3 or 4 different businesses, and we're very transparent about what we do, why we do it. Not every dollar and cent, but like this is what we're doing, honey. We're buying it, we're rehabbing it, it increases the value, we're selling it. We're really talking about money and what things cost. And, that's kind of a weird topic for a lot of people. And it can be. And, I tiptoe a little bit with it. But talking about what things cost and retirement and how much electric costs for your house and bills and why you don't leave water on and showing water, like all these little things in the back of their brains, one time will eventually make them a full functioning human on their own and be very successful. But hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah. And what you're doing, and it'll be my transition here, but you're creating and building and forming their mindset over time. So I want to shift to that and talk about mindset a little bit with you. So you talked about your story a little bit, and before on the pre-call, you talked about mindset as just being an important thing to you, or just so important to success, your mindset around success. My first question for you is, how has your mindset evolved over time? How has it changed from 15 years ago, 10 years ago to now? What are some big shifts in your mindset?
I think one, and I have a few, but one was, being young, I just wanted to make as much money as I could, as fast as I could, and climb the corporate ladder. And I wanted big titles. And I got those big titles, and then all of a sudden you get those, and you're like, oh, well, that was cool. Like, what's next, right? Like, that wasn't as, empowering as I thought it was going to be. And so I had a mind shift, really not even when I got into real estate, it was after. It was become when the snowball effect started happening. And I'd go to my day job, and I understand numbers pretty well as owners. I'm sure you do as well, right? And I started thinking about like the amount of time I was putting into that job and what I was making that ownership group in that company. And I was like, well, what the hell? I was like, I'm busting my tail and I'm probably making these guys millions of dollars. And what happens if I just gave even 90% of that effort to myself? And that's when the realization goes, you got to bet on yourself. And I was so scared to do that because we're taught that that's bad a lot of times. You should go work for somebody. You should be glad you have a job. Be thankful for every dollar you earn. Be thankful for a good employer. And all those things are true. And I was very thankful for that. But at a certain time, you have to say, like, am I going to put these 40 hours back into myself and make myself, quote unquote, wealthy, or whatever term you want to use? Or do I want to keep putting that 40, 50, 60 hours into somebody else and making them rich?
And I think it's especially if you have the desire. I think it goes back to our earlier discussion. It depends on what your desire is. If you're like, there's different personalities that can handle entrepreneurship, I think, and that maybe aren't built for it. But so it depends on what you want first. But if you do want it, well, the phrase I really like is you have to bet on yourself. And betting on yourself can be in your career, in your profession, in your business, and again, in other areas of life. So tell me more about just that bet on yourself. Like what do you see from other people? If you feel strong about that statement, you must see a lot of people that don't bet on themselves.
Well, yeah, I do, but let me step back one and fill in the last part of that. So you mentioned, seeing people. One of the things that made me realize that I don't mean this to come off egotistical, and I'm sure if I'm being honest, we have pretty similar personalities, so I'm sure you thought about this at some point in time. I looked at around people like that were pretty successful business people, and I'm like, if that guy can do it, I can do it. Like, if I'm being honest,
Never.
no, yeah, like I could do that. Like, there's no way that I don't have that skill set or better than that. So first, that was part of that realization. But two, yeah, you look around at people, and I think the difference is what you said is desire, right? And so that person probably could do it if they had the desire. But what I didn't want, and I'm sure what you didn't want, is one day saying, man, I wish I did bet on myself. Like, I know I could have did that, but for whatever reason I did. And this is where I give kudos to my wife, Kate, was she never stopped real estate. She's always been like, do it, do it, do it. But she looked at me one day in the eye and said, why are you working this hard for two people, yourself and somebody else? You're clearly more passionate and love what you're doing by, your entrepreneurship or your own company. She goes, you need to quit. And I wasn't planning on quitting for 8 more months. And the next day I called my boss, who's fortunately a very good friend of mine, and told him that, I'd like to work on an exit plan. But that it is incredible to think back to, those forks in the road that you're talking about. And
Yeah.
one of them was bet on myself or not have the drive and just be happy with what I got. And there's probably a ton of people that take a right turn, and obviously clearly me and you took a left turn at bet on yourself.
How did your, I have like 4 or 5 or 10 different questions on this topic because I'm so passionate about it, but how did your how did your business change when you left your job?
Uh, let me explain where we got to before I left, because that will probably make more sense. So, at the time where, let's go to 2022, I was still employed. I left my job in 2023. At that point, I had about 125 rental units. We were doing about 20 flips a year. So you guys can do some basic math on that. We were sustaining a pretty decent sized business there. And then on top of it, my partner now, Stan Remling with Follow the Deal Investments, so that is our group investing company. Me and him decided to form that company, but originally it was just for me and Stan. It wasn't really for outsiders, friends, and family. It clearly became very quickly to us that, oh man, we have so many people who don't want to be active and want to participate though. And
Yep.
so we decided to make that a group investing company. We quickly bought about 400 units in that next year, almost 500 in that next year, and then was working towards starting our own property management company. So that got us kind of to a point where I was like, okay, like when my wife was looking at me saying, yeah, you got to make a decision. So we grew really fast.
Yeah.
How my life changed, it's so cliche. So I'm going to say it and I'm going to say, sorry, it's so cliche. Like time freedom, controlling my time. Like when you have 50, 60 people that work for you, you honestly don't control your day as much as you think, because they need help. They're calling you as much as you can delegate. They need assistance and leadership. And so what happened was all of a sudden that stopped. Like there was none of that outside influence coming in. And I was able to truly work in the business and then eventually on the business to get to where we're at today, where before I was just trying to keep it all together.
Yep. And I've used it before. I mean, for me, when I quit my job, which there's a lot of fears and anxieties and questions over that big shift, but when I did it, the analogy I tell people, especially in their situation, whether they, if they're an entrepreneur or a side hustle, but it's going pretty well and they think they can get it there, be smart about it. But a lot of times the risk you take, the risk is I'll have to come back to doing what I'm already doing today anyway. The potential benefit of it is that, like, I put it in time terms. Okay, time, freedom, all these cliche things. But in year one, like when I was working full time, I could spend 10, maybe 15, 20 hours tops a week on real estate, right? So per year, let's say an average of 15 hours a week. Well, if I shifted and now I'm focused on real estate full time and I can work 45 hours a week on real estate, I just 3x'd my potential output. So what I could normally get done in 3 years, I can get done in 1 year, right? And you have all the added focus and lack of distractions to grow your business. So again, that can apply to anyone that has a business that's growing. If there's customers there, if there's opportunities and you have something going, you can really, I think, accelerate it. And I've heard the phrase, again, if people are in this situation, how much is your job costing you? If you have something good going, there's really a potential to grow it. And it goes back to betting on yourself, as you said, fear, regret, not failure, things like that. Be smart about it. But a lot of times your risk might be just you have to come back to what you're already doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of this financial freedom stuff out there that drives me nuts, like I said. And our businesses, and there's a lot of different business or entrepreneurs that you talk to on your podcast, but our particular business, real estate, it's an active business, right? Now, the one thing that you mentioned that I think is interesting is you said, hey, now I can take that 45 hours and I can 3x my business. But what also happens when you're doing something full time is you get better at it, right? And
Yep.
so what used to take you 3 hours for that task takes you an hour and a half. And so you get better and better. You become, because you're working in and on the business, you get better processes. And now all of a sudden, maybe your 45 hours becomes 40 or 35, and you're doing the same amount of work as it used to take you. So there's so many benefits to what I saw going full time, and now I just hit a year, a little over a year, doing it 100% dedicated, no other W-2 job. But it has been a blast, and to be honest with you, I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind is I talked about time, but you talked about three or four other things, focus and all those things. All those things like efficiency, how fast you do, all those things compound as well. So that's why how much your job might be costing you this year, like your return might not be this year, but the compounding impact of that over a 3, 5, 7, 10 year time frame, all those things that you just talked about can really add up over the long term. So I really like that. During whether it was during that transition of leaving your job or if it was, you know, buying your first rental properties, whatever it might be, what were some really significant fears that you had throughout the process?
I mean, it's funny. So milestones and so the first property we bought was a fourplex. We've always been an out-of-state owner, so we've never been in town, quote unquote, or in our geographical area. So I live in Florida. All our investments, for the most part, are in Indiana or Southern Michigan. And so our first fourplex, like I had somebody look at it, but it was an on market, traditional 25%. I think I used like Rocket Mortgage or something, like, which is so funny now to think back to that. Like, I didn't even know like who to call, like who does mortgages yet? Who's the lender? But that was the scariest decision I made ever. Like truly, like I stayed up for a week wondering if I just bankrupt my family. And so you have that, right? And that's just fear of the unknown, I think is the best way to put it. But what's funny is you look at the last 4 years of my real estate career, and I'm looking at my notes. I think you said 2013 for you. So, last almost 10, 12, or 11 years for you. There's these junctions that happen, right? And so that was one. And then I bought two properties in cash. So I did a HELOC loan on our house, right? And they had low rates at the time. And I went and paid cash and I refied them and I got most of my money back immediately. And that was super scary. Like, oh man, I've never wired that much money before.
Yeah.
Then I flipped my first house and essentially got stolen from too in the midst of it. And that was scary. By the way, that was the worst case scenario. Well, we still made 25 grand. You know what I mean? So it's like every bad thing. I've seen houses burn down. You name the fear. I've had people die in our apartments, which is super sad, but it just happens. Old people do eventually pass away. But all these things have happened, and every one of those is a fear of the unknown. And then it happens, you're like, I mean, that was awful. House burned down. Like, that sucked, but I got an insurance payment. And I made $10,000 on the house. So every milestone you hit, and then it was like buy a 20-unit apartment, buy a 129-unit apartment. The dollars and the challenges and the unknowns get bigger and bigger. But as you accomplish those, I guess is probably the right word, or hit that challenge head on and jump that hurdle. It's surprising that those unknowns and those fears just start to melt away.
And I think that mindset, I wrote down just to kind of tie this full circle to this financial literacy discussion that we had around kids. So we have kind of built out our core values for our family. A lot of them are faith-based. And one of those words is courage, try new things. Because building the muscle, building the grit, building the mindset around trying new things. Like we have a son that just overthinks a lot of things. He gets that from me probably, but he just overthinks things a lot. But every time he does it, it's just like jumping off the low dive or just small things like that. All those things, when they do it, what do? They go do it again and again and again and again, right? And we just
they jump up and down like they literally accomplished the biggest thing you could ever imagine.
Right. And I think building that muscle at a young age is so important because here we are, 40-ish years old, both of us, and we're still dealing with that stuff. We're still looking into new situations and thinking of all the different issues, and it's just the fear of that unknown. So I think whether that's for our listeners, for your kids, whomever it is that you can influence, like trying new things and just understand like the risk with those, how serious are they really? And realize you're going to learn a whole heck of a lot from having the courage to go take action.
So I'm going to squirrel on you real quick. Do you ever watch Ted Lasso?
No.
Oh my gosh, that's right up your alley.
I just don't get a ton of TV time in or
All right, I'm adding it to your list, but there is a lot of swear words in it, so you got to keep that in mind with the kids around. But there's so many good positivity one-liners. I'm actually putting a lot of them on LinkedIn now for the next couple of weeks. But one of them is from they use it's. I want to make sure every disadvantage has its advantage, and it's from a Dutch football coach. And like, so think about that. Like, break that down a little bit. So essentially, what they're saying is people just they don't know any better, right? So I used to talk about sales reps with this is they don't know any better, so they don't have all these fears, right? They just run through a wall. You tell them to go into that car dealership and go talk to the GM and pitch them some software service, kick open the guy's front door and ask for him. Like if they have a certain mentality, like they're just going to do it because they don't
right.
know if the guy's going to yell at them. They don't know all that.
Yeah.
And so they just don't have a fear built up. And I think as we get older, sometimes, I find myself in this too. We create our own fears, and sometimes you got to remind yourself. And it's the advantage. There's advantages to disadvantages, and some of that is just not knowing. And if you don't know, you don't have the fear. And that's why I think, like, me and you, when we first got into real estate, if you don't overthink it too much, you just kind of do. And then that big hurdle comes up, and you're like, well, I didn't expect that. Like, I didn't expect my house to burn down. Like, and then you accomplish that and you get over that hurdle, that fear. And so anyway, that quote kind of stood with me. Every disadvantage has an advantage. And if you kind of use that to your advantage, you're able to create that chaos, which is essentially no fear. You have no fear.
I like that a lot. Any disadvantage has its advantage, Ross. That's good stuff. I want to shift gears a little bit to kind of the final segment of the show. So I want to talk about we talked about success for you and your kind of just business career. What have been the key factors to your success?
There's external and internal. So I think the internal ones is, we all have the ability to control certain things. And I think when you have a belief in that, like, Phil, when you wake up in the morning, you can control X, Y, and Z no matter what, right? So some of it is your mentality. You're choosing to have a good day mentally. Like you're waking up and you're saying, I'm going to make this a great day, right? So it's kind of mindset day one. It's your drive, right? It's being organized. All those things, your follow through, your follow up, you can control that. Sales, business, teacher, entrepreneur, doesn't matter. You can control that. And that, thankfully, I was taught and embodied that very early on in my career. And I embody that today as entrepreneur. And the people we hire and bring onto our team, I try to ensure that they embody that, because I think that you cannot teach. You cannot teach somebody to have drive, period. The external things is, we all are fortunate to have some great leaders around us, and I had some excellent ones. And so, everything from, I had great upbringing with my parents and my mom and my dad. I had great mentors at different companies. And so, if you surround yourself with good people and you have that mindset, I think you're really set up for success. And fortunately, I like to think, we've been semi-successful. I use the word semi, on purpose. I hope we are.
That's awesome. Yeah. Association, your network, we talked about networking. By the way, we talked about this before the show too in our corporate careers and how important networking is. And if we went to events, my wife would always like, oh, you're going there to air quotes network.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, it is important. But I think who your network is, who you're choosing as your mentors, as your colleagues, as your peers, and as you said, surrounding yourself with good people is so important because you become with whom you associate. So you're going to, if you look at the 5 people and where they're at that you're hanging out with a lot, you're probably going to become more and more like them over the course of time. So I think that's so important. What do you think your key to success will be moving forward?
This is going to be such a lame answer, and probably not, like, you're not going to write a bunch of notes about this one, but to be honest with you, it's just more of the same. I think at 40 years old, I'm not going to say you can't reinvent yourself, because that's naive and stupid to say, but I think you're becoming the man or woman that you're most likely going to be. And so I've been fortunate, really the last 5 years, I figured out who I want to be, the type of person I want to be, the type of father I want to be, the type of husband I want to be. And so really going forward, I'm just going to try to embody every minute of that and try not to lose myself. As you continue to grow and stakes become a little bit bigger, sometimes you lose the mindset or the focus on why you're doing this in the beginning. And, my goal is to kind of keep that focus and keep that consistency.
I like that a lot. Just be consistent, know yourself, and be consistent. Execute upon what you want to do. Very, very good. What is the most impactful business or real estate book that you've read, and why?
So, man, I listened to a couple of your previous episodes. There's a lot of good ones mentioned. I don't think this one was mentioned, and it's honestly, I'm not a big reader. I should be. I am more of a podcast or ebook person, but there's one book that's by Jim Collins called Good to Great. It might be up on your shelf somewhere on the right side. I can't tell. There's a red cover for.
That's a different one. It's over there. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, okay,
yeah,
sorry. My right, your left, but yeah.
yeah.
So I like the book a lot, but there's one particular line that to me really stood up. And it's about getting the right people on the bus in the right seat.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then get them off the bus. And for whatever reason, in my 10 years, particularly at my last company, I felt like I really learned that and embodied it. I carried that over to our business today because, man, that is true. And you can deep dive and peel that back all you want, but essentially, like you talk about surrounding yourself with the right people, hiring the right people, make sure those people have the right roles and responsibilities. And for myself personally, like, what are my weaknesses? I need to put myself in the right seat, and make sure that I'm doing the things that I need to do that I'm really good at, and then bringing other people on and putting them in the seats where I'm weak.
I love that. And yeah, right people, right seats. The other way is like right people, a lot of times is maybe what your core values are for people to think about. What are your core values as a business? You talked about some different things, or your like drive, just organize all those things. But what are the core values are the right people? And then the role, the specific role and what they do is getting them in the right seat based on their skill set and what they like to do. So that's great advice. Good to great. Also, the traction book series talks a lot about that too. So what about your most impactful non-business, like personal development book or podcast?
I was going to
because
mention a second book, and it's going to be off the wall, and mostly because sometimes we just need light stuff that you can run or work out to and just kind of listen to that gives you a chuckle, but also has like a mindset aspect to it. And so Kevin Hart has done like 3 or 4 different books in this realm, and he's like very transparent about like where he's made mistakes. He's had some infidelity things, and he talks very openly about that. In his latest book, I had to make sure I wrote it down right. Monsters, Kevin Hart, Monsters and How to Tame Them. And it talks about all these different like internal demons that we deal with that and we battle with every single day. So things around selfishness, things about looking for approval, outside approval, especially like social media and things like that. And so it's just a great, like easy listen. It's probably a 6-hour audio book, but if you're looking for something to either, for the car or run it or have your headphones and run with, it's a really easy book, but it gives you a lot of good one-liners and to be honest with you, some laughs along the way. So that makes it fun too.
I'm gonna have to check it out. And honestly, what I like about that is so much of what we do, what we feel, even the external world, it all starts with internal and what we see first. So I really like the mindset books and the internal books, as you said it. So appreciate that. And no, we have not heard. I think someone referenced Good to Great on one of them, maybe earlier in the
I had to
episode.
have a second one. So,
but there's no way anyone said monsters and how to tame them. So we will have to check that out. This has been so good, Ross. A lot of great nuggets. I mean, the financial literacy. Appreciate bringing kids into this and that part of the discussion. Just the mindset. The discussion on fears. So many nuggets throughout the interview. So I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you, Ross?
So we were joking about this early, like we both, well, I'm not gonna say we both, but I personally suck at networking a lot. So I am on LinkedIn though, relatively heavily. So I apologize if you reach out there. There's so much spam on there. We were laughing about that earlier too, but that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Again, Ross, ROSS, McArthur, MCARTHUR. And of course, followthedeal.com is our website and our brand.
Awesome. I appreciate that so much. Ross, thank you for the time today for the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. This is Phil signing off. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.